Welcome back to the All Things Real Estate Podcast. I'm Chris McAllister, and I'm here today with my sidekick, Lacey LeBlanc, and our Director of Sales for Roost Real Estate Company, Priscilla McNamee. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So today we're going to talk about what we call My Next Roost. And what that is all about is what I want to have a discussion about today is what it really means for homeowners to move from one home that they own to another home that they're going to own. So this is like the most stressful thing I think that goes on in the world for people moving from one house to the other. And I think it's far more stressful than even being a first-time buyer because there's just so many other moving parts. But it's also incredibly exciting because this is really one of those things that it's a step up in life. It's a bigger future opportunity. So that's kind of what I want to get into today. So Lacey, why don't you kick us off? From the emotional side of it, what was it like? How long have you been in your house?
It's about 4.5 years. Next year will be 5 years.
So did you move from another house that you owned, or was this the first home that you guys bought?
This is the first home that we bought. We moved from a rental home that was Nana's, of course.
Oh, there
So
you go.
this was our first purchase of a home.
Yeah. So what did that feel like when, I know this is about move up instead of first time, but what was it about being in the apartment or being in the Nana's rental house, I guess, not an apartment that, it just didn't fit anymore? What motivated you to move on to that next step of owning a home of your own?
Yeah, I mean, so the old house was great. We loved it. And because it was Nana's, it's like it was ours. We could do whatever we wanted to it. We could improve it. We could update it. We could, so it was like we were living in a house that we owned just because it was family and we had that luxury. But quite frankly, my kids got older and Kevin and I were sleeping in the living room so that we could give them both each their own bedrooms. Because, I had been divorced and he had moved in, and we had planned to buy a house right away. And it took us almost 2 years to find a house that we felt like was a good investment and checked all the boxes and had the yard that we loved and the space that we needed and all that good stuff. So, yeah, I mean, it felt like it didn't fit us. We had outgrown it, and our plans really, like, it took a long time for us to get there because finding the right house in that market was really difficult. And it really took COVID to make it possible for us because we ended up moving in March of 2021 to this home, but we have been looking since 2018.
Wow. Well, and your situation is unique because renting from Nana is like owning your own home. So
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and it was a sweet deal. So I hated to leave it,
yeah.
honestly. And I think that's a really good way to look at it though, is that, is what we wanted to move to had to be better than what we were already in, right? We had outgrown it, but it wasn't, it was COVID. Nobody was coming over. Nobody cared that,
Yeah.
we had a like a day bed in the living room kind of thing. Like we still had an entertaining area. We still had outdoor space. But we just were very adamant that the next thing, the thing that we bought had to be better than what we were currently living in.
Yeah, that's a great point. Priscilla, why do you think, what do you think the big differences are from moving up or to a different home versus being a first-time buyer?
Well, I think as an agent, one thing that um, I try to make sure that I always press the point with people is that I am always making them, I try to make sure that I let them know that I fully understand that this is not about um, just bricks and mortar. This is about making major life transitions. And they're not just changing an address, they're actually closing one chapter and they're opening another, so it's not that they're just leaving a neighborhood. They're leaving a place where their kids grew up, so they're leaving. I mean, they're leaving a lot of memories behind, so it can be really, really big for people. And it can be nerve-wracking, You know what I mean? So it's really important that they are paying attention to um, the amenities and all of the good things in these other areas, that they can start all of those new chapters, new memories, building a new foundation. Because like Lacey said, it can be very difficult, very difficult.
I think you almost have to help them articulate why they're doing this. Are they,
I feel, yes, I feel like it's an emotional tug of war.
yeah, yeah. And I think the people who do it well and enjoy the process and feel great about their purchase after they make it are the ones that aren't just moving because everybody else is moving. They're the ones that are moving because their life has changed. Either another kid's on the way or they want a different school district or what have you. But I think that personal why, what their motivation is. I think if as a real estate professional we can tap into that, I think it helps the entire process and I think helps keep a client for life.
Yeah. And I think it's important that we are always here to remind them of their why. So,
Yeah, yeah,
and be
I
their
think that's critical.
soundboard.
This is where being a real estate agent becomes being a counselor as well.
Absolutely.
Operating as a counselor without a counseling license, is there a law against that? It's funny. I got my license, gosh, it's been like 20, 23, 24 years ago now. And one of the advantages, actually it was a disadvantage too, was, when we worked in retail, I worked at Target for years and in that, I guess it was 15, almost 20-year period, you know, Kelly will tell you, my wife, that we moved basically once every, I think it was 14 months for the first, you know, 15 years or so we were married because we would, get promoted, transferred, whatever it was. And, we got really used to, um, leaving one neighborhood and moving on to the other. But the reason we stopped doing that was because it became too hard, it was too much emotionally for the kids. It didn't make sense anymore. So, when we decided that I was going to change careers, get into real estate, move back to Springfield and so forth, part of that motivating factor was we wanted the kids to be able to finish school in one place and not have that tug of war back and forth. So in one sense, it's easy to minimize, the emotions of moving back and forth. On the other hand, I think we knew exactly what people were going for because we had done it, if that makes any sense.
Oh, absolutely.
So what are
Yeah,
some
it
of the
can't just
common,
be a good deal, right? It can't just be like everything has to fit. I think that's important. Like in my family, a good deal is like the holy grail, right? So if you see something that's a good deal, you get it whether you like need it right now or you might need it later or but that was one of the things that we came across was there were some good deals. There were some really great houses that weren't good deals, but they were perfect for us. It's like being able to navigate your way until you find the right balance of whatever it is. So the best school district for your kids, close to family and friends, that was important to us. Enough space, but like for us, the outdoor space was also very important, having a big enough yard, and enough room to entertain people outdoors. So I think that having somebody, and in my case, Nana was pivotal, but having somebody to remind you that because it is emotional and it's easy to get caught up in something. Like when you're viewing a house, you can see that yourself in it, or you can see, would be a great playroom, but then that can make it really easy to lose sight of maybe the financial portion of it or the logistical portion. Well, it's not really in the neighborhood that you wanted. Your kids would have to go to a different school, or so having somebody there to, like you said, Priscilla, remind you of what's important to you, your whys, I think is a hugely underrated role that technically you don't get paid for. So I guess probably there's no law against it, Chris, if you're not getting paid for it. But it's an underrated part of the relationship, because we're paying an agent to make sure the paperwork's in order and things go the way that they're supposed to go. But that counseling part of it is really huge.
You made a
yeah.
really great point, because you are literally balancing excitement, for a new start with the sadness of letting go. And I think that's something that people need to always remember as they're going through that process.
So Priscilla, what are some of the common worries and fears that you hear from homeowners who are looking to sell their home and move out to a different home?
I feel like it's a cocktail of emotions, don't you? Um, I think the biggest thing is the fear of balancing it. Is it all going to work out? The timing, logistics, financing.
When Kelly and I were in, we're moving every 5 minutes. I think she was the one, she and the girls were the ones that were, probably feeling more of the emotions. I was the one that, being the analytical person that I am, was more concerned about, getting the loan, affordability, what happens, God forbid, if we don't get our home under contract before, it's time to go close on the next one. I mean, that's the thing about being a great real estate professional like you are, Priscilla. There really are two sides to this coin. You've got to be the soft skills person. You've got to be empathetic. You've got to, understand motivation and the emotions and keep bringing people back. But then the other side of it is there's math. You've got to be able to say to this person that, well, let's start with the house that you have, and it's two transactions, but they're so interlinked. So you've got to show them this is what your house is going to sell for based on other homes in the neighborhood. I need to know what your mortgage balance is so that we can figure out as close as we possibly can, how much money you're going to have when you sell the house. And then it's the same process on the next house. We talk about getting a good deal, but a good deal on the house you're living in isn't just about the numbers. It's about, does this fit my lifestyle? Is it worth a stretch? If you're going to be there for the next 20, 30 years and quote, you overpay, from the market analysis, that's probably okay, but you still have to be able to afford it. You still have to make sure you've got the down payment money on the day of closing. You got to know how much the next house is going to cost and how much you're going to get. And I think that's where a lot of real estate professionals, sadly, I think still fall short. They may get the emotion right, but I think they often just aren't comfortable with the numbers. Do you find that?
I find that a lot more than we should.
I mean, the thought of getting a mortgage, even though financially I am a numbers person, I'm a data person and a spreadsheet person. So I had gone over it in my head multiple times. I had my spreadsheets, but the thought of having to go and get a mortgage just was enough to make me just stay where I was. It was enough to
Yeah.
make me not want to have to go through that process. So I can't imagine having to logistically double that, right? Moving, like having to put one house on the market. And my best friend Lindsay wants to move back here, close to her family and close to us from where she's living now. And this is something that she is so anxious about, putting her current home on the market and then having to purchase another one. So much so that she said the other day, she was like, maybe I'll just live with my parents. I'll put my house on the market. If it sells before I find it, I'll just live with my parents for a little while and then I'll look for a new home, which is a solid plan, right? But I worry for her that she might miss out on a really great home in the very particular area that she wants to live in, which where homes don't go up for sale that frequently, because she's fearful of having to do both of those transactions at one time. So I'm interested, Priscilla, in how you help folks kind of manage that portion of it.
I think the most important thing is to put a game plan together for them. I mean, everybody is different in that case, and everybody's homes are different. Um, Price ranges are different, obviously. So, especially like here in Springfield, we'll have some properties that we just know are going to sell much quicker than others. Whereas there's some properties that I do think are going to take a little bit longer to sell. So I think that definitely will play a role on when we do put their house on the market versus holding back for a little bit. We are in a market now where people can get by making contingent offers, where that means, of course, for those that are listening, subject to their house selling, where it's also just as easy to put their house on the market, subject to finding a home of their choice. So I think a lot of sellers don't realize that they can do that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. We talk about not uh, making the sale of your home contingent on finding the home of your choice. We always think about it the other direction, that um, my purchase is contingent on selling my home, but it really does go both ways. And I'm absolutely convinced that, I don't know what the percentage is, but I think there are a tremendous number of people out there who can afford to move, want to move, but just like Lindsay, it's very daunting and it's scary. And if you don't have, somebody like you, Priscilla, in your corner, there are people who just stay where they are for years, and hopefully they're happy. But the fact is, they probably could have had a bigger future than they did. So, having that real estate professional in your corner, I think means a lot. And I think that's really what moves the market, to be honest with you. So what could go wrong? People legitimately have fears, whether it's on the emotional side or whether it's on the cash side of that coin. But what are some of the things that I guess could go wrong, for somebody who's moving up into a new home, if they're not, I guess, educated in the process, or have a great agent working with them?
Is that for me or Lacey?
It's for all of us.
Well, if you leave it up to me, then my imagination is going to run wild, Priscilla. So you should probably answer. When someone asks me what could go wrong, my anxiety is like, this is the moment I've been waiting for.
And I personally don't think like that, but I do try to prepare people for like the absolute worst, because I think sometimes people don't think about, escalating tax bills, taxes going up. People don't think about higher utility bills. People don't think about higher maintenance. People don't think about longer commutes, things like that. They look at buying a bigger house, maybe further out in the country, but they don't think about the expense that comes with that. And that is something
Do
that
people overestimate how much their house is worth frequently? Because I look at Zillow and I'm like, there's no way. I think to myself, like, I have a very healthy skepticism about what Zillow tells me my house is worth, because I don't see it selling for that at any point. But is that something that, especially with kind of like, homeowners have a lot of tools at their disposal now, so anybody can go to Zillow and see what their house is worth. Do you find that people are wrong about kind of what their house is worth frequently, Priscilla, or?
Unfortunately, right now, a lot of people have their houses listed for more than what they should be listed for. The market has slowed down tremendously, and I personally have houses that we need to be dropping prices because they're just not moving. And that is for Clark County, Champaign County, Madison County, Franklin County, Montgomery County. I mean, it is all of Central Ohio right now. So, I mean, the market has just slowed down tremendously, and you are seeing a lot of reduced prices because people have really been basing their list prices on sales from 12 months ago, and the market has just changed.
Yeah, I think it's changed dramatically, especially over the summer.
Yeah.
This whole thing about overestimating equity, yes, there's a number on Zillow, but even if that Zillow number is accurate, right, within 2, 3, 4%, what I think a lot of folks fail to understand, and this is really a first-time seller problem, right? We should probably be talking about first-time sellers. They don't know, they don't have any idea what expenses they have on the seller side of the transaction that go against that purchase price. I think most people have basically a good idea of, what their loan balance is, but they don't really have a good idea of how that loan balance changes over the course of, the last payment to the next payment. It continues to go up. They don't have a sense of what long tax proration means and how much that costs, or how much conveyance fee is, or we haven't talked about inspections, but if there's something that needs to be done to the house because there's an issue with the house that affects habitability, what does that cost? And I think a lot of times people look at their estimate, they get all excited, they start looking at other houses, they may either start walking through houses, talk to some realtors, And then when the time actually comes to sit down at the kitchen table and talk about what their house is going to sell for and what they're going to net, that sort of, if it doesn't shut down the process indefinitely, it usually postpones it for a few months. I mean,
It can be
I'm sure you've
misleading.
had, I bet now that I think about it, if I sat down at any given time with 10 people to list their house, I would say, Priscilla, for me, 3 or 4 of them we didn't list because the numbers just didn't pan out the way they thought they were going to pan out.
I mean, it can be very, very defeating once they look at those numbers.
Yeah.
That they just don't realize it. And that's not even including the commission. I mean, they just don't realize what's involved with selling a house.
Well,
Which
speaking
is
of
why that
commission,
net seller sheet, right, is so important. We did a blog post a couple of weeks ago about a net seller sheet and how, an agent with Roost will go through that as one of the very first steps. And I just wanted to mention that because I think that's really, as somebody who has not sold there, I would be this first time seller that you're thinking about, Chris, or Lindsay would be this first time seller that you're thinking about. But knowing that information first and foremost before, like Priscilla, you said, getting your hopes up for the for the next houses. Not that we're trying to kill anybody's dreams, right? But just manage expectations.
but it's
Let's
funny you
manage
say that.
expectations.
Nobody wants to kill anybody's dreams, but I can
But you
remember
do.
it's all, but I do. It's all coming back to me now that, you say to somebody, look, I would much rather disappoint you today, at this meeting than, 6, 8, 9, 10 weeks down the road, a week before closing, and it turns out you don't have the funds to purchase the next house. I'd rather disappoint you now than later, I think. And we have that responsibility as real estate professionals, in my opinion, that we understand how the math works. What's it cost to sell a house? What's it cost to buy a house? So I'm
But
trying to
not
get off
every
my
real
high
estate
horse there,
professional
but
is that way. Some real estate professionals will still list a house. Um, you know, and I guess if the seller still wanted to, Reese probably would too, um, but knowing that you've given the homeowner the most accurate information you have for them and then allowing them to make that decision as educated as possible, I think is huge because I just don't think everybody works that way. That's not something that I think a lot of sellers are familiar with, even sellers, who are moving up to their second or third or fourth or forever home, because that's just not how every real estate professional operates.
yeah.
I'm going to
Well,
tell you
you mentioned
something.
commissions. Oh, I'm sorry, Priscilla.
Oh, that's okay. I'm sorry. But just on that net sheet topic, when I have buyers also that are lowballing sellers, and I truthfully think that the property is worth what it's listed for, and they're really not benefiting themselves by making a lowball offer, I will show them a net sheet of what that seller is actually going to end up netting with their lowball offer, just to educate them of what the seller is actually going to be paying. So they can see how, I'm not trying to be rude here, but how ridiculous their offer is. And it does shed light. And they're like, oh, wow, okay, I get it. I get it. And it makes them realize, okay, I am making an absolutely absurd offer. So that net sheet can be used multiple ways.
Yeah. It's funny, the people that make those absurdly lowball offers, first of all, they tend to lose the first couple of houses that they go after, but it's always interesting when the tables turns and their house is up for sale and somebody writes them a lowball offer.
Yeah,
So it's been a little over a year now since the whole NAR lawsuit settlement thing. Has anything changed, Priscilla, in conversations that you have with homeowners when it comes to putting their houses up for sale?
I feel like it's just made everything more transparent. It's given everybody a clear agreement. There's been more negotiating. I mean, I think it's been better overall, personally.
Yeah, my sense is that I don't think that the commissions that buyers and sellers are paying has materially changed that much, but it's definitely spelled out in the listing agreements and in the purchase contracts what the commission is, who's paying it, and who's getting it. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
I mean, everything's negotiable, and if, if as a seller, if somebody presents, a home seller an offer that, they want to get a commission for their buyer agent, they need some closing costs and so forth. I mean, everything is just a point of negotiation. And I think we like to tell our sellers that, we're going to urge everybody to make their best offer. And if that includes that they need to, help paying their buyer agent their fee that they agreed to, then they should write that in. And, I, as your listing agent, we're going to present every offer to you, and we're going to go through them. We're going to figure out which one makes the most sense for you from a bottom line perspective or a term perspective. So at the end of the day, it's what most of us, or the best of us anyway, I think we're doing with every listing, but now it's just sort of codified, I guess, with the new contracts.
Yeah, I think it's working out really well, honestly. And I feel like we are most certainly empowering sellers. So I feel very comfortable with it.
But we haven't seen that it's negatively impacted buyers either. For the most part, we're
No,
seeing that sellers are happy to pay that buyer agency fee, because they know what it takes to sell their house, I guess, to put it bluntly.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Is there any key differences, Priscilla, between working with a first-time buyer these days and a move-up buyer, or is it more? What differences do you see when you talk to a move-up buyer versus a first-time buyer? Is there anything that stands out?
I would say your move up buyers are just more comfortable. I mean, they've already been through it. They're more educated because they've been through the process for
Yeah.
sure.
So what we're dealing with there is not a first-time buyer, but we're often dealing with a first-time seller. So I guess that's my.
Yeah. So they do have a, yeah, and they're very anxious about that process, which it can be. Um, it's not easy putting your house on the market, letting strangers walk through. Um, it's it can be tedious.
So let's talk about some strategies and tactics. What about how are lenders able to help um, move up buyers these days? Priscilla, what are you seeing as far as, getting pre-approved or pre-qualified, and how does that all fit in when you're moving from one house to the other?
A lot of these lenders are offering some programs which are really great. Of course, you've got your bridge loans. Um, you've got your HELOC loans. I will tell you, Right Pat has a program also where they've got a bridge loan type program where once you sell your home, when you do sell it, you can apply the principal to the mortgage. It's not really a bridge loan. It's where you take out a new loan, but then once you do sell your home, you can apply the principal to the new home loan, and they do adjust the payment, which is
Oh,
unheard of.
wow.
Which is unheard of. Most people do not do that. The downfall to all of these loans and all of these programs are the closing cost and all of the additional fees. So I try to encourage people, if we can, if we can juggle it, and if we can work with a contingency with either, the buy side or the list side, we're better off to do it that way. And then that way we can save them, $5,000 to $10,000 in closing cost, um, and not go that route. But if there's a house that they just absolutely can't live without, or we cannot do a contingency, especially like on some of these foreclosures, or like some of these auction properties, then that's the only option that they have.
Yeah. And I guess what's interesting is, this conversation today is really about people. What we're talking about today, the emotional side of it, and even the money, it all counts. But we do work with people who are fortunate enough that if they want to buy a new house and they have the luxury of picking that house out over whatever period of time it takes, and they have the financial wherewithal to qualify to have two mortgages, or, maybe they have cash, they're able to make it easy, right? They buy the next house. They took the time to find it. They buy the next house, and then they come back and they call it their agent to go ahead and sell the first house. So at that point, that's pretty cut and dry. Other people have the wherewithal to sell their house. Maybe they got an offer they couldn't refuse. Maybe they're able to go rent for a year or something. Maybe they're going to move in with family, and then they, go out and start looking for their home unencumbered, so to speak. But those two things, I would say are, few and far between compared to most of us who need to be able who can't get a second mortgage and be qualified to make two payments or don't have all the extra cash. So your only options then are potentially a bridge loan, which is clearly an option, and that's why we would urge everybody when they're thinking about moving up, the second call you should make after calling your real estate professional is calling your lender. But that the piece that you know scares all of us and where you really need somebody in your corner is when you've got to pay off this loan on the day of closing and you've got to buy that, get signed for that mortgage on the same day. And that's where it gets a little bit tricky. But sometimes as we're having this conversation, I forget that there are a lot of people out there that are not a lot, but a significant number of people these days that are able to just go buy their next house and then they come back and think about how to handle their first house.
Most of my closings I've had recently where people are selling and buying, we've been able to do all of the closings the same day. So, and the last one that I just did, we closed their purchase at 1 p.m. and we closed their sale at 1 p.m. and we closed their purchase at 4 p.m. and it was funded the same day. So,
Yeah.
Meaning the seller of the house that they purchased at 4 p.m. did receive their money. So
Yeah.
it was a fully funded closing.
Yeah. And we touched
I
on the
think this, Ted,
contingency.
this is where I was most concerned, and this is where I will be most concerned because I'm kind of right in the middle here, right? I've got my first, and now I'm thinking, do we want to move? I've always joked that I'm going to be here until I die. I don't want to move again. I don't want to go through this process again because it was so stressful for me. But my lender was a huge help in explaining all of my options and telling me, what was available to us. We had a down payment, but there ended up being down payment assistance. So we were able to use that. I think we've talked about. So just navigating through all of these, I mean, just the words alone, bridge loans, HELOCs, contingencies, like those are words that like we just don't use in our daily lives if we're not in this industry. So just having somebody to explain that to you and see what your options are and show you what the numbers would look like if you did it this way versus that way, I think was the thing that made me feel the most at ease and allowed me to focus on getting the right property versus the one that wasn't going to stretch me financially or the honestly the one that wasn't going to stretch my anxiety on how I was going to fund it. So having somebody you trust both in the real estate agent seat and the lender seat, I think is phenomenally important. And I don't think that a lot of people are attached to their lender necessarily. It's like, okay, who's offering the best rates or who's offering, but I do think that there's something to be said, just like with a real estate agent. If you have somebody that you trust, then you get a lot of benefit out of that above and beyond, what you're paying as far as a rate is concerned or closing costs or that kind of thing.
Lacey, you made
Yeah.
such a great point there because, and I'm going to go ahead and throw a name out there, but Bill Riley, for example, with Cross Country Mortgage, he is somebody that I trust wholeheartedly. I've known him for 25 years, and I am not kidding you. He's one of those people that if I send a client to him who is in this kind of situation, right? And if they have a unique situation that a local bank can service them better, he will pick up the phone and he will refer them to them. He will not be a disservice to that person just trying to get them in a loan, and trying to create a commission for himself. And that's where a lot of these people, a lot of consumers don't realize that these like online lenders, that's all they're going to do. All they want to do is close your loan. They're just out to make a commission on you. They really don't care about your well-being and what's best for you and what looks best for your situation. So that's where the lender comes in and plays such a huge important role, in a situation like this, especially.
Yep. I think you and Lacey need to have Bill on a podcast for an all things real estate podcast. I think he'd be a great
He would
guest.
be, yeah, he would be an amazing guest. Amazing.
As long as he has the patience of a saint like my lender did, I think we would be just fine. Otherwise, I might need to sit that one out because I have lots of questions.
I just want to, as we kind of wrap up this conversation, I want to touch on contingencies again, because so as a seller, how do you phrase that, Priscilla? That the purchase, the sale is contingent on. Let's just underline those two sentences for me. Can you do that?
So a lot of times, what I'll do is I've kind of shifted gears on that, and I will change the contract where I'm trying to make this as simple as possible. I don't want to confuse people. I use very simple verbiage by just simply stating that this contract is subject to a successful closing of 123 East Main Street. And then what we'll do is and I just say that, and then just make the contract good for, let's say, 60 days. Okay. And then by doing that, by writing the contract like that, what we're doing is we're asking that seller to lock in with us. So that way there is no escape. There's no quote bump, there's no bump clause. So I am canceling that out completely. So when I do that, I'm not using our Springfield board contract. Not to get so technical, I'm trying to keep it simple. And that's typically how I have personally been writing my contingent contracts. And then if I have a seller on the other end who says, well, I don't want to do this for that long, I don't want to be tied up with you if the house doesn't sell, we'll put a clause in there that says, well, give us 3 weeks. And then if we don't get their house under contract within 3 weeks, we'll revisit this. And that's a way to at least give us some time to get their house under contract. And typically it works out. It works out for everybody.
Yeah. And it works out in a strong market for sellers like this. It's still a seller's market, especially if they're priced right. You can get it done in 60 days. Back in the day, it was a little bit tougher. It took a little longer. Houses were on the market longer, but that makes perfect sense. And then the other side of it is, if seller, so that's when I'm confused again, right? So if you have a seller, right, that wants to sell their house, but what if they haven't found the house of their dreams yet? So there's a contingency on that side of it as well, potentially.
So, yep. In that case, what I'll do is I'll list their house subject to finding suitable housing.
Yeah.
And the reason I word it like that is because I do have some people who will put their house on the market, and I have this right now, which I cannot believe, this young family, but they have 3 small children, and they will either move in with family or they're going to move into a camper. They're okay with that. But I still protected them, and I put their house on the market subject to them finding suitable housing. That way they're just not pushed out. And that way it just protects them to be on the safe side.
Is it still customary in Springfield? It seems like it was customary in Springfield that the sellers would have up to 30 days to stay in the house after closing. And that was very unique because it really only happened in Springfield. It never happened basically in Columbus or any place like that. Are we still seeing that? Because obviously that provides some flexibility too.
That has really gone by the wayside. I mean, we are really, really steering away from that.
So it's always occupancy at closing.
Yeah. I just had a closing like this where somebody had been in their house for a very long time, and she was, 80 years old. We just made it a prerequisite at the very beginning that she definitely needed 30 days after closing. So I just set that stage at the time of listing. But typically, no, we are very rarely doing 30-day possessions.
What about rent back agreements? That was something that I used to see every once in a while, but I don't know that that's happening much anymore, where the seller would maybe get their 30 days in the house, but they had to pay rent to do it.
The last time that I've done that was actually in the Columbus market. That's where I see it more than I see it here in Clark County.
But it is another potential option. It's just another
Absolutely.
tool in your toolbox if you're that you can draw on when you're moving from one house to the other.
Especially people who are relocating, who are trying to secure housing, but they don't need to move right this moment. That rent back option is an amazing tool, and
Yeah.
that's where the seller can stay in the house and just pay rent to the new buyer, and for an X amount of time. And it just works out for everybody. And the buyer is protected, of course, because the people, the owner, the past owner, they have to keep the house in the same condition that that buyer had last seen it. So all of that still applies.
Yeah. There's some risks, but sometimes you got to take a risk to make the deal work. And it's just another option to have on the table in the event that you need it.
There's
Well,
some
as a
really,
So,
future probably seller, that's what I hear is that I can make this work however I need it to. Like there's so many options. Like selling your home, buying a new home is completely customizable as an experience if you have somebody who can tell you what all those options are and help you, you know, put it into words that can then be signed as a contract. So
yeah.
that's actually such a relief, right? And I think that a lot of people who, especially the people who are moving up and are moving up from their first home to their next roost, is those folks who haven't sold before maybe don't know what all of these options are. I would venture to say that people who have sold many, many times over still don't know what all the options are if they're not in the industry. So, I think we talk a lot about the first conversation you have with folks. Priscilla, I feel like every podcast we do, Chris asks you a question that has to do with when you sit down and have this first conversation with this buyer or this seller. I think just explaining that, you tell me what ideally this would look like, and let's work our way into that. Let's see if we can't make it ideal for you. And it sounds like to me that it almost always could be the case. There are options out there that could accommodate whatever you might need. It's just knowing what they are and getting connected with the people who can make it happen.
I agree. And one thing I do want to mention on this podcast, and I hope that people listen to this long enough to hear this, but I think one warning that I would definitely have for anybody out there who is in this situation, because they're going to be very nervous about selling and buying, or somebody who has a house that's just sitting vacant, for example, and they're nervous about selling it. Let's say that it needs some work and they don't have the money to do the work. They're being solicited by these We Buy Houses people very aggressively right now, very aggressively. And they are actually sending them checks in the mail. They're also sending them purchase contracts that are very appealing. But yet there's a lot of like they're garbage. I'm just going to be honest. And I'm telling you, some of the offers that they've been making to these people is pretty despicable. And I just encourage people to contact either an agent that they can trust or contact a real estate attorney. Just spend the money for a meeting, have a real estate attorney look it over before they ever agree to sell their house to somebody like that. Because like I said, they are hitting these people hard. I myself have received letters from these people. So, I mean, I've seen them first-handed, and it is awful. And what's so sad is like a lot of people, they think avoiding a commission is going to save them money. But at the end of the day, they're actually losing 3 times that money. It's really, really sad.
Yeah, there's a lot of that right now. I mean,
That
I get texts every day for people unsolicited asking me if I want to sell a rent, one of my rental houses or something.
This is
It's
the worst I've ever seen.
it's very intrusive.
Yeah.
And if somebody's not, I don't want this to sound, if somebody's not educated in the process or has never sold a house before, they are high pressure. They can come across as very compelling. There's a lot of fear behind it. Do this now or you're going to lose for the rest of your life. And I think that's a great point, Priscilla. There's a lot of that going on right now, and people need to have the courage to either shut it down Or like you said, get with an attorney or a real estate professional they trust to get some feedback on those offers. Well, why don't we end on a hopeful note? So what would you say, Priscilla, to somebody who's in a house right now, but they've got 2 kids, it's only a 2-bedroom, there's another kid on the way. What words of hope and encouragement can you give these folks as we wrap up?
We can do it.
That's right. Okay.
We can do
We've
it.
done
That's
it before.
emphasis on the we. I think there's like I'm with you. We can
Yeah,
we can
we
do
can
it,
do
right?
this. Yeah, we can do this. We've got this. Yep,
Yeah,
we've got
no,
this. We're a team. We've got this.
I think that's perfect. Anything else, Lacey or Priscilla, today?
I think about I think about Lindsay and I think about her getting ready to make this exact move and the benefits that it's going to bring for her because her life has changed. Like you said at the beginning, when she bought this home, that was what fit her needs. Now she's ready to make a move. And fear is never, education is the opposite of fear, right? The more you know, the less fearful you will be. So I just feel like the more we can learn about the process, you don't have to be the expert. Priscilla will be the expert or your agent will be the expert, but the more you can learn about the process from a reputable source, I think the less fearful you'll be, and the more you'll be able to focus on, finding the right place and getting on with your life in the way that you've envisioned.
Yeah. All right. Well, if you're listening and you're starting to feel like your current home just doesn't fit anymore, I hope today gave you some encouragement. You've got options, you've got strategies, and with the right plan, you can step into your next home with confidence. If you're ready to talk about your next chapter, reach out to us at Roost Real Estate Company. We'd love to help you build your bigger future. We also have a very detailed blog post that we'll have the link to in the show notes that talks in detail about tax tactics and strategies that will help you confidently make the move from your current home to your next home. Well, ladies, thank you very much, and we'll talk next time.
Thanks.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.